Divorce. It's one of those things that just changes everything, right? It reshapes families, finances, and the entire future. But when it's all said and done, who actually gets the worst of it? It's a really tough question, and the answer, well, it's a lot more complicated than you probably think. Okay, let's get into it. So yeah, who really bears the heaviest burden here? Is it men, who are often looking at the massive cost of supporting two different households? Is it women, who we know often face a huge financial shock? Or is it the kids, the ones caught right in the middle of it all? That's the big question we're going to try and unpack today.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll follow the money and look at the financial fallout. Then, we'll dive into the emotional toll, which is just as important. After that, we'll look at the cost for the next generation. And finally, we'll try to pull it all together and see if we can actually answer the question.
All right, first up, let's talk about the most measurable part of all this, the money. A divorce almost always means a big financial hit, but as we're about to see, that hit is definitely not spread out equally.
Okay, get ready for this number because it is a big one. For women, the financial shock can be just staggering. Study after study across multiple countries shows that a woman's income, on average, drops by about a third after a divorce. I mean, think about that. Losing 33% of your income overnight, that's completely life-altering.
And this chart right here, it shows you exactly what that looks like in the real world. That huge drop in income leads directly to a major drop in the standard of living for women. Now, men feel a financial pinch too, for sure, but their drop is typically way less severe. In fact, some studies show that for men who are higher earners, their personal financial situation can actually improve. So here's the bottom line. Both sides are under serious financial pressure, but it's a totally different kind of pressure. For women, it's about a direct loss of household income, and incredibly, their risk of falling into poverty nearly triples. For men, the pressure comes from new expenses, things like child support, alimony, and just the massive cost of setting up a whole new place to live.
But of course, we all know divorce is so much more than what's in a bank account. So now let's talk about the emotional and psychological side of things, because that toll can be absolutely devastating.
And you know what? When it comes to mental health, the pain is pretty much an equal opportunity offender. Divorce is consistently ranked as one of the most stressful events in a person's life. I mean, it's right up there with the death of a loved one. And the data totally backs this up, showing higher rates of depression, anxiety, and just overall stress for both men and women. But even though everyone's hurting, the way that hurt plays out can look really different. Women tend to report more intense emotional distress right after the split. For men, the emotional fallout can be more of a slow burn, often showing up later as social isolation and the really profound pain of losing that daily contact with their kids.
But here's a really fascinating twist in the story. While that short-term pain is absolutely real, some research shows that for women who were in really unhappy, low-quality marriages, getting divorced can actually lead to big improvements in their life satisfaction down the road. So for some, it's not just an end, it's the beginning of a much happier chapter.
All right, now we need to talk about the group that has absolutely zero say in this whole process, but who can end up carrying the consequences for decades to come. Let's talk about the kids. What's the real cost for them?
And I've got to be honest, the long-term data here is it's really tough to look at. On average, kids from divorced families face a whole list of increased risks over their entire lives. We're talking about things like earning less money when they become adults, higher rates of teen pregnancy, a greater chance of mental health issues, and even higher mortality rates. These are not small things. They're serious, statistically significant trends.
But this right here might be the most important takeaway of this whole explainer. It's not necessarily the divorce itself that does the most damage. The research is incredibly clear on this. The single most harmful thing for a child's well-being is being exposed to constant, high-stakes fighting between their parents. If parents can find a way to separate with low conflict, the negative effects on their kids are dramatically reduced.
Okay, so we've looked at the money, we've looked at the emotional fallout, and we've looked at the impact on the next generation. It's time to put it all together and try to answer that big question we started with.
This table does a pretty great job of laying it all out. You can see, clear as day, that there are no real winners here. Everyone loses something really important. Women take that massive hit to their income and standard of living. Men often lose that daily connection to family life and can end up feeling very isolated. And the children, they lose their sense of security and face real, measurable risks to their future.
So who loses the most? Well, the real answer is, it depends. It totally depends on how you define loss.
If we're talking about purely financial terms, the numbers point pretty clearly to women taking the biggest hit. But if you define loss by the long-term, life-altering risks, you can make a really strong case that it's the children who bear the heaviest burden of all.
And that leads us to one last thought. Maybe asking who loses most frames the whole thing as a competition where somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. What if we asked a different question, a better question? How can we change the way we approach this incredibly difficult process so that everyone involved, men, women, and especially the children, can lose less?